Okay, we're recording. Welcome, everybody. Most of you know who I am, but for those of you who don't, I'm Joey Lott, and I think it would be appropriate if I just give you a very brief background to who I am. So for the last 7 years, I've been sharing publicly about, I think you could say broadly, healing. And the reason I've shared that, as I'll share with you momentarily, briefly about my story, is because I had a lot of challenges and a lot of healing necessary because I was struggling tremendously in life. And so I'm very passionate about sharing the things that I discover that help. And I know what it's like to struggle, and I want to be of support to anybody who is struggling, because I know how isolating that can be and how discouraging it can be. And I want to share with you a message that it really truly is possible to heal, and it does not have to be nearly as difficult or as impossible as most people would have you believe. So this workshop is a somatic workshop. We'll talk about that in just a few minutes, what that means. But what we're going to be looking at specifically in this workshop is TMJ, jaw, head, neck, face, and shoulder discomfort, pain, and restriction. And we're going to be looking at how you can use this approach that I share called somatic reawakening and integration in order to find relief and comfort and maybe even pleasure in your body once again. So I've got a few notes here I'm going to refer to just to make sure that I don't miss some of the things that I wanted to talk about. So today is going to be a practical workshop. So you're going to get an experience of this. We're going to take about 2 hours, and I'm going to give you the experience that is available to give you in 2 hours, which can be fairly profound. And so I want to make that clear. This is a practical workshop where I'm going to invite you to explore these movements with me, or it's more than movements, but we'll see as we go along. And so in order to make the most of this, you're going to want to have a place where you can lie down on a flat surface, and you're going to want to make sure that you can be comfortable while you're doing that. So you want to make sure that you'll have adequate padding to ensure that you're comfortable. And I'll be talking about that, I'm sure, multiple times throughout, as those of you who are participating in the full somatic reawakening and integration course know it's an important thing to be reminded of, because we have this habit of pushing ourselves too hard and allowing ourselves and tolerating pain and discomfort where we really don't need to, and in fact we shouldn't, because it hinders the healing process. So broadly, before we get to the practical portion of this workshop, I want to give you an overview of what this bigger work is all about and what kind of benefits you can expect from this. So the main thing is that you can expect through this work to discover greater ease and comfort, and you can also necessarily then expect to have a reduction and maybe even an elimination, not even maybe, eventually, if you are persistent in this, you will find a complete elimination of pain, discomfort, and restriction. And by that, I mean chronically. So you may still have accidents that might cause pain, discomfort, and restriction, but this process and this knowledge will give you the tools and the knowledge that you need in order to have greater ease and comfort in your life, and to really find that you can eliminate that chronic pain, discomfort, and restriction. And I think it's also important to mention that beyond that, there are many other benefits that you can experience through this work. And some of those benefits include healing from chronic insomnia, restless leg syndrome, headaches and migraines, anxiety, panic, air hunger, weakness, fatigue, digestive problems, on and on and on. Now, the claim like that seems a little bit crazy. So before you write me off as being some kind of wacko, let me answer maybe the question that you might be asking yourselves, which is, how can it be that something like this could have such a diverse range of benefits? And before I answer that question, I think maybe a better question that I'll propose to ask is, more fundamentally, why should we suffer any chronic pain, discomfort, restriction, anxiety, fear, fatigue, etc.? Now, I'm not saying why should we never experience those things, because I'm not saying that we should never experience those things. Those things can be important guides in our life. If we're doing something that is dangerous or reckless and we experience some pain or discomfort, that's helpful in the moment because it gives us feedback to guide us to be more aware and make better choices. But what I'm talking about is chronic conditions. And I think it's really worth asking yourself for a moment and really considering, why should you experience these kinds of chronic conditions? And when that question finally dawned on me, it was really pivotal for me, because I realized that I had been accepting the status quo, but I didn't have actually a good reason to do so. And the truth is, I've been studying this stuff pretty intensely for over 20 years, and I have never found any convincing argument for why any of us should experience these kinds of chronic conditions. In fact, all the evidence points to that we should be able to experience ease and comfort as our baseline experience throughout our entire lifetimes. So if you have accepted chronic pain, restriction, or discomfort, or any of the other kinds of conditions that I've mentioned, then it's really worth pondering that and considering why that should be true. And as you'll see, and hopefully I'll remember to remind you throughout this, one of the important parts of this work is to question, but not to question in a analytical way, although we don't have to push that away, but really just to question in an open, direct way, in our direct experience, if the things that we've believed to be true and accepted to be true are actually true or have to be true. And so in this work, one of the things that you'll see, because hopefully I'll remember to guide you in this, if I'm present enough and not too nervous to do so, I'll remember to guide you repeatedly that it's very important in this work to really take the time to let the initial conditioning, the reactivity of our conditioned mind, our conditioned nervous system, come and go, and to really just feel more deeply into our experience. It's through that direct feeling that's unconditioned that allows us to find where that healing comes from. You know, an important point actually here is that the root of the word healing is wholeness. So etymologically, healing means wholeness. So we're really talking about a restoration of wholeness, or a restoration of our awareness of wholeness, and to live from that. And that allows us, when we access that in our direct experience, it allows us to cease to feed into those habits in our nervous system, the conditioning in our body mind that repeats the same patterns of fear-based restriction, pain, and discomfort. So, refer to my notes here again. Right. And I see a question here. Can it help with coming out of a freeze response? And I missed the rest of that, so I will momentarily take a look at that. And just a note about this, I will make space for questions, and just for the sake of keeping this flowing, I'm not generally going to be pausing for the questions except for at particular times. And this is similar to what Peter Levine talks about in his Somatic Experiencing books. Yes, as I'll mention in a moment, Peter Levine is one of the inspirations for this work, one of many. And yes, absolutely. Whatever this can help with any chronic conditioning in the nervous system. So let me tell you a brief story about something that happened this morning that was, I thought, very on point. So I live with my family, 3 young children. We live off grid. That's why I'm in a yurt here, and we have some animals. We have some goats. And this morning, my son, who is 6 years old, was leading the goats around the yard with a bucket with some food in it, because it's nice to take them for a walk. And the next thing I know, he's coming into the house. And the goats are following him into the house. And I'm saying to him, take that outside. I don't want the goats in the house. But he was unable to process what I was saying to him. And we had this miscommunication because what I wanted was for him to lead the goats back outside because I didn't want the goats outside. But what was on his mind was something different. Because what I found out a few moments later was that my youngest daughter had fallen and was crying outside, and he was coming in to let us know so that we could go help her. But he was unable to process, let go of the bucket, help the goats stay outside, and then come in and let us know about this message. And in that moment, I was unable to process, my son is not just trying to lead the goats inside to be troublesome, he's actually trying to be helpful. And so we had this miscommunication. And the reason I bring up this story is because that is what the conditioning in the nervous system causes. It's a miscommunication, a misunderstanding. We interpret the sensations based on fear, and that produces pain, restriction, and discomfort, and all of the other symptoms that I described. So long as we continue to cling to that conditioned response and reactivity, as I had been momentarily doing this morning with my son, then we perpetuate the miscommunication and we continue to experience life as problematic, painful, and restrictive. But when we pause and we feel into the experience and we allow ourselves to open to the really infinite field of potential and possibility that is available to us, it allows us to begin to make more intelligent choices and responses to life that are going to be more in alignment with what life is really about. Now, if you just notice, life is about life. Life is happening, and it's about flow. It's not about pain, restriction, and discomfort. That's just the interpretation of the nervous system. Okay, so a lot of words, I've got a few more. How did I discover this work? I want to just share with you how this work came about because I want it to be really clear that this is not something that I've invented. This is something that I've discovered, and it's something that I have made contributions to, but it really is standing on the shoulders of giants. You know, I had a lot of suffering in my life. I'll very briefly tell you about that story in a moment. And that led me to explore, to study, and to try and find real solutions. And that's where this work came from. This work came from over 20 years of me investigating and dedicating myself to this study in order to find real solutions. And so it's based on the enormous influences of very, very many people, and we're standing on the shoulders of giants. Just a few of those people, to put a little bit of perspective and context here, include Moshe Feldenkrais, who's the developer of the Feldenkrais method, Thomas Hanna, who's the developer of somatics, Ida Rolf, who is the developer of integrative, I don't know what it's called. People just call it Rolfing. Peter Levine, who was mentioned earlier in a comment, and Dr. John Sarno, all people from the West. Also, many, many, many people from the East. Oh, one more person who I forgot to mention is Ken Cohen, a Qigong teacher who was a tremendous influence on me. Many people from the East, too many to name, but a few who I'll mention. Paramahansa Yogananda, Tirumalai Krishnamacharya, and Shiva Premanandaji, all who have been very significant influences. For those of you who don't know Tirumalai Krishnamacharya, he is the person credited with bringing Hatha Yoga to the West, possibly even being the modern inventor or reinventor of that system. So let me briefly tell you about the story of this discovery, because I think it's useful just to give a little bit of context so you can understand that this really does work, and it can work for all kinds of things. So no matter how long you've struggled with these conditions and no matter how severe the conditions, this system can work for you. It's based on sound principles. It's based on an understanding of human physiology and anatomy. and it can work for you. And so I want to just share briefly my story so that you can understand that it really can work. So I'm 40 years old. From the time I was born, I never had a day until the last couple of years in which I actually experienced pleasure in my body. I experienced restriction, pain, and discomfort that increased over the years. I was always the slowest kid. I was the one who couldn't do anything physical. I couldn't do a pull-up. I couldn't even hang on the bar. I just was very challenged. And I couldn't run because I was always in too much pain to run. And despite all of my attempts to improve through all of the ways in which we're told to do these things, stretching, working out, etc., things didn't get better, they actually got worse. Now, externally, things appeared to get better in terms of I was able to perform better, but I became more and more crippled to the point where by the time I was 30 years old, I was so ill that I was unable to stand for more than a few minutes at a time. I had severe chronic insomnia, and I had a whole host of problems. I had severe TMJ disorder, and that led to a whole host of digestive problems. I got to a point where I could barely eat. I had severe anxiety and OCD. At one point when I was about 30 years old, up to that point, I had a fairly successful career as a software developer, but I gave up that career because the anxiety was so intense and the OCD was so intense that I gave it up and lived in a cargo van. And I had multiple chemical sensitivity. I had severe sound sensitivity where even the smallest sounds would send me into a rage. It was a really, really desperate thing. And I'm sure I'm forgetting many of the things. So I was in bad shape. And it had been going on for a long time. And nothing that I had tried, and I had tried many, many, many things, none of them worked. None of them actually gave me lasting relief. So I have experienced a dramatic healing from this work. And at this point in my life, none of the things that I've listed to you plague me any longer. I experience pleasure in my body. I experience pleasure in my life. I don't experience crippling anxiety. I'm able to sleep through the night. Well, I usually have to get up to pee once, but I'm able to sleep. I'm able to get refreshing sleep. And I'm able to move freely. So all of this and more is possible. So we're going to get to the practical portion of this. And just one moment, I want to give you a few notes so that you can have the maximum success with this. And hopefully I'll be reminding you of these things throughout, but I want to mention them up front so that in case I forget along the way about any of these things, at least I've mentioned them up front. So the very first thing I want to tell you is that this work is all gentle and nurturing. So that should be the mindset. This is gentle and nurturing. We are not attempting to try and use force or violence of any kind, not even subtly, in order to force any kind of change. We've all had way too much of that in our lives. This is actually a radically different approach, and that's probably the hardest thing for most people to really understand. And the real turning point is when you really understand that, because that allows you to use this system to experience dramatic healing. So that's so important. I hopefully will continue to remember to remind you of that throughout. So it is gentle and nurturing, and as I just said, for most of us, the habit that has been ingrained in us over and over and over by the dominant culture is to push, to try harder. And so please remember that less is more in this work. You will have the fastest results and the greatest success with this if you remember that. Gentle and less. The more will come in time, but we're not trying to get an external result. The external results are all about trying to create something that will get external validation. So we've all had that reinforced throughout our lives. If I can appear to be successful with this, if I can get it to appear correct, I'll get the external validation. I'll get the approval from others. I'll be considered a success. But that hasn't really paid off. So what we're doing here is radically different, because what we're really interested in is not what it looks like, but we're interested in feeling into it. And so do not push and do not strain. If you are straining or pushing, it's very important that you ease up. Along with that, you should not be experiencing pain. You should not be increasing the discomfort. So we always want to start from as much comfort as we can find, and then we want to move from there very slowly and very gently, so that we can continue to discover that comfort and ease throughout a larger range of the movement. Next point I want to make is slow, slow, slow. This work is slow. Again, we are all conditioned to move fast. It's a very fast-paced culture that most of us live in. And that won't give you the kinds of results that you want in this work. This work is about slowness, because it's about feeling. It's about feeling into your experience. And there's a biological underpinning for this. When we move in our normal, fast-paced way, we're utilizing a part of the nervous system that only has access to our habitual patterns and conditioning. Now, that's great for efficiency, unless those patterns are not efficient. And if you're experiencing chronic pain, discomfort, and restriction, then those patterns are not efficient. So what we are wanting to do is to access the nervous system in a different way, which allows us to recondition the nervous system. It's just a basic biological fact that in order to do that, you must move slowly. So it's all very slow, probably way slower than you think. Next, the movement always begins with intention. So before we even move, we begin by, first of all, as I mentioned a moment ago, finding the comfort from that starting place. And then before we actually initiate a movement, we explore the intention to move. Because what we're wanting to do is to connect up our intention, our volition, and our ability to move. And in order to do that, we're facilitating the development of somatic awareness. So somatic means, briefly, the way that I'm using the word, our experience, our inner experience of being in the body. So again, it goes back to, we're not interested in what it looks like so much, although if I see something, I can often provide feedback to somebody based on what I see. But it's most important for everybody here that you tune into the inner experience. And so we're wanting to connect up through the development of somatic awareness, so that we're increasing the accuracy of our inner mapping, our inner sense of what it is to be in the body. This is going to facilitate greater, a greater clarity or flow from intention to expression through the body. And just to, so that might seem a little bit, I don't know, strange, those words. So let me ground it in something more practical terms. So all of us have the ability to voluntarily make some kinds of movements. So if I said, for example, blink your eyes, probably at most, if not everybody here, can voluntarily blink your eyes. So you have this capacity for volitional movement. But if I said to you, I would like for you to now do a handstand, and I'd like you to do that, I'd like you to get into the handstand extremely slowly, and I'd like you to do it with ease and comfort and pleasure, probably most of us can't do that. Now, I'm not suggesting you need to, but the point I'm making here is that somewhere between those two extremes, we can increase our somatic awareness, which allows us to have greater volitional movement so that we can move with ease, comfort, and fluidity. And part of the importance of slowing it down is that we have many blind spots in our somatic awareness, and that will be highlighted through the movement. Because we do the movement slowly, you'll notice that there are certain points in the movement where you'll run up against, I don't know how to do this. I can move a little bit, and then I don't know what else to do now in order to continue that arc of the movement in a fluid, comfortable, gentle way. So that's highlighting that there is a blind spot, because most of us know that we can push through and we can accomplish something with force or momentum. But that momentum or force is just skipping over our somatic blind spots. And that's not what we're trying to do. Again, we're not trying to get an external result. We're trying to feel internally so that we can smooth out and fill in all of the gaps where we have the blind spots in our somatic awareness. This is what's going to allow us to heal, what's going to allow us to have a greater experience, or more pleasant experience in our bodies. Next, I've already said some of this, but feeling is key. So you must feel. And as some of you who are already participating in the full course know, sometimes that feeling is challenging, because sometimes we come up against a feeling where it makes us want to run away and escape. So the important thing here is that we are wanting to feel, but it's very important, again, that we start from comfort and we move very slowly right up to the edge of where the feeling starts to become somewhat uncomfortable, not fully uncomfortable, but just to the edge. And then through feeling into that and exploring without reactivity, this allows us to reawaken that somatic awareness so that we can then begin to move into that area that had previously been a blind spot. And lastly, which I've already said, again, we only move, well, I didn't say this actually, we only move with comfort in this work. And that's an important thing to remember. So that doesn't mean that that you're not allowed to feel things that are slightly on the edge, but we're not wanting to push into discomfort. We're wanting to start from comfort, or as much comfort as we can find. I understand some people never have any comfort. So you want to find as much comfort as you can to start. And then we want to continue to move with that comfort up to the edge of the comfort. Then we explore, and that expands the range of the comfort. That's the end of my notes, which means we can begin to move. So before we do that, anything that was not clear or any questions you need to ask before we get started with the movement portion, the practical portion. And in order to ask the question, I should mention that I am recording this, and this will be going up on my YouTube channel afterward, as well as on my website. So presently, I'm the only one being recorded. If you choose to unmute yourself and speak, that will be recorded in the video. So you will be giving your implicit consent to use that portion of the video on my YouTube channel and on my website. If you need to ask a question and you prefer not to be on the video, you can type it into the chat. It's not entirely guaranteed that I'll see all of those questions. But well, actually I should, because I'll be opening up, like I am now, a time for questions. So if you have a question before we get started, you can either unmute yourself and speak, or you can type it into the chat and I will respond. And I'll just give a few seconds for anybody who has any questions. Otherwise, we'll get started. Okay. So we are going to begin well, let me say, so as I mentioned, this is specifically looking at jaw, head, neck, shoulder, face. You have gotten yourself into more than you bargained for, And the reason for that is because everything in the body is connected. I don't know if you ever noticed that, but it's one body. It's all connected. So the thing that might seem strange to you is that we're actually going to be starting from the pelvis and core of the body. And we're going to then transition later on in the workshop to some movements that are more targeted to the shoulders, head, neck, and face. Why are we going to be starting with pelvic and core movements and explorations? The simple reason is this. The pelvis is the powerhouse and the center of the body. So the pelvis has the most of the strongest muscles connecting to it and going through it. And so the pelvis is what controls our body and our movements. If you have chronic restriction, pain, or discomfort anywhere in your body, I can virtually guarantee that you have also chronic patterns of restriction in your pelvis. Now, your nervous system may or may not interpret those restrictions in the pelvis as pain or discomfort. That's an important thing. So you may be thinking to yourself, well, my pelvis is fine. I don't experience any problems. That's fine. But through this work, you will discover that you've had restrictions in your pelvis. And what's going to happen, and I say you got yourself into more than you bargained for, you will experience benefits in your body that extend far beyond your shoulders, neck, head, jaw, and so forth through this work. So we're going to begin by lying on our backs. And I'm going to tilt my camera so that hopefully you'll be able to see me while I'm also doing these movements so that we can do them together. And that way you can look at me if you're needing any clarification, and hopefully you can still hear me. If you're having problems hearing me, please let me know. So we're going to start on our backs and bend our knees so that the knees are up toward the ceiling and the feet are on the floor, and our arms resting on the floor at our sides. Now I've got my head turned because I'm speaking to the camera, but you will want to have your head upright in a neutral, comfortable position for you. Now again, I'm going to remind you that it's important that you find comfort from the start, or as much comfort as you can find. So if you find that this is uncomfortable, please find a way to make it comfortable. That might mean extra padding. Sometimes people need to start in bed. Now that's not ideal if you don't need to. The ideal is to find the balance between comfort and firmness, because firmness will give you the most feedback. But again, it's important that you find the balance. So we're starting on our backs and the knees bent, feet on the floor. Now, if you find that you're experiencing any strain in your legs or anywhere, if you find that you're experiencing any strain in your legs or in the pelvis, then explore the foot position to see if you can find the placement of the feet that gives you a comfort that allows you to be able to hold this position with comfort fairly indefinitely. We're not going to stay here indefinitely, but we're going to be here for a while. Also, I want to mention, I know it's a lot of talking, but these things are important. It's very important that you are responsive to your own needs. Obviously, I'm here in a hot yurt in Vermont. I don't know what you're feeling. If you begin to experience discomfort that you're unable to adjust or release, then it's important that you don't allow that to develop into something that will be any greater than that. So you need to take responsibility for taking a break if you need to. I am not expecting anybody to do this workshop continuously if it's not appropriate for them. So please be responsive to your own needs. If you need anything throughout, feel free to take a break and get yourself whatever you need, whether that's to go pee, get a drink of water, go lie down in bed, lie down on the couch, sit up, anything you need. You take care of your needs. It's important. Now, from here, the very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to just feel the sensations. And this is a very important step because, again, feeling and then allowing for the initial conditioned reactivity to come and go is going to allow us to drop in to what is unconditioned and what allows us to begin to choose differently. So notice the sensations, and the great thing is that whatever sensation you are most drawn to is the right one. Now notice that you can effortlessly allow your attention to go to the sensation. And notice that you can allow for your attention to have an open quality to it. So for most of us, the initial response that we have is one of reactivity. So you'll notice that there's a story that goes along with the sensation. Your mind already has a story. It has a label about it, what it's called, what it means. Now this might all be below the threshold of your normal conscious awareness, but if you just tune into it, you'll notice that there's this subtle story, or sometimes not so subtle story, that has to do with what it means, where it came from, what it's doing to you, what you need to do. And so you'll notice that you have all kinds of habits to accommodate the sensation, trying to adjust, find comfort, get it right, power through it. We have all of these strategies, but what we're doing here is just noticing with open attention, gently resting on the sensation, that we can begin to open to the sensation in its raw form. And as you allow for that, you may notice that you can even soften a little bit. So just see if you can allow for a softening, not a forced letting go, a softening. And don't worry if you're doing it right. Don't worry if you're getting the results that you think you should get. It's just an open exploration of your own experience. So already from the beginning, you may find that just through this exploration of open attention and opening to the raw sensation, letting the conditioned reactivity come and go, you may notice that you can soften. If not, that's okay. But just continue throughout this work to notice this, because this is really the core of the work. It's the development of somatic awareness, which comes through your presence. It's your willingness to be present to your experience as it is, which is not what you think it is. Now from here, we're going to begin to explore this first movement. So the first movement that we're going to be exploring is a pelvic tilt. And so the pelvis, you could think of like a bowl. And in this position, it's like a bowl that's sitting, that's resting on the floor, upright. And we're going to explore how we could tip that bowl down toward the tailbone and then back the other way. And through this, what we're going to be noticing is that the neutral position, so again, like the bowl is just resting, would be neutral. We're going to be exploring finding that neutral through the inner the inner experience, through this presence with the inner felt experience, combined with conscious, slow movement. So as I said earlier, in this work, we begin all movement with intention. So before we even make a movement, we begin just to have the intention to move so that we can have confidence that we know how to initiate the movement. So the first movement we're going to do is to slowly tip that pelvis in the direction of the tailbone. Now again, don't do the movement yet. I'm going to guide you through it, and initially it's just through intention. So don't do the movement, but hear my guidance now so that you can start to feel into how you would do it through intention. So the first thing we want to do is feel the backside of the pelvis resting on the floor. So it's making contact with the floor, and you want to just notice that. And you can notice that there's a heaviness, and that you can allow for that heaviness, just the weight of the legs and the pelvis, to actually be supported by the floor where the pelvis is in contact with the floor. So as you notice that sensation there where the pelvis is in contact with the floor, just allow that to open and soften so that you can feel the weight of the pelvis and the legs being supported by the floor. Most of us have a habit of tensing everything up, but we're not aware of it. So just through this exploration, we're starting to notice how we can soften and be supported. Now, as you are aware of the sensation of the pelvis resting on the floor, and you can feel the weight of that contact, I want you to imagine how you would initiate the movement to begin to roll that weight toward the tailbone, so that the tailbone eventually will be pressing gently into the floor. And the key here is that we want to do this smoothly and slowly. So just imagine how you might do that. And when you feel confident that you have a good idea of how you would do that, let's begin to explore that movement with a micro movement. And the micro movement is to confirm that yes, you do know how to do it, or to give corrective feedback. So just very, very gently make the tiniest movement, as slowly and smoothly as you can, rolling the pelvis slowly toward the tailbone. And I'm doing this with you, and if you were to watch me, you would probably not see me doing anything because it's a micro movement, and that's what I'm encouraging you to do. Now, when you have reached the furthest range of the micro movement, which is hardly anything, then pause here. Now, this should be non-strenuous, but it does require the tiniest little bit of effort. And what I'd like you to do is just notice where that effort is coming from. And you can do this several ways. One is to directly sense where the effort comes from. And two is to explore letting go of effort anywhere else. And these are complementary. And I encourage you to make use of both of these throughout this work. So here's a few clues. Your belly doesn't need to be doing anything here except for just hanging out. So see if you can soften the belly. Your legs don't need to be doing much. Your buttocks don't need to be doing much. Face doesn't need to be doing anything. So just see what you can let go of. And then slowly, with intention, smoothly release back to neutral. And notice if you've tuned into where the effort is coming from to initiate this movement efficiently, you'll notice that as you come to neutral, that is what is releasing. And here's a clue. You'll feel your lower back releasing and coming ever so slightly more into contact with the floor so that you can receive the support of the floor. Now, neutral, as I said earlier, is where we're optimally supported and at rest in this position. So we're exploring finding that neutral. Don't rush right back to the starting position because that's probably not neutral. Explore feeling into it. When you are in neutral or your best neutral in the moment, take a moment to pause and notice if you become aware of any sensation that you can soften and open to. So we're not trying to get rid of anything. If your nervous system says that's pain, that's discomfort, that's whatever, then just see if you can open to it and soften. Now, importantly, again, I'm not asking anybody to push through anything. So it's important that you don't try to power through it. But do take a moment to just see if you can open and soften. Now again, we're going to explore that same movement, but if you feel that you were able to successfully make that movement last night, then let's explore it in a slightly larger range. Now when I say slightly larger, I'm not saying a big movement, but make it a slightly larger range if it feels appropriate. If not, do the micro movement again. So let's slowly roll the weight of the pelvis in the direction of the tailbone. Now this time, somebody might see a subtle movement if they were watching you. Notice that as you do this smoothly and slowly, that whatever you noticed the last time you did it comes into play. So let the belly be soft. Let the belly open, not forced. It just opens naturally as you explore this movement in a gentle, slow way. And then when you're at the maximum range that feels appropriate for you in this moment, which hopefully is not very big, you're just starting out small. Again, pause. And remember, this should be non-strenuous. If you're straining, ease up. You want to be able to hold this indefinitely without strain. And just tune into the sensations and notice what unnecessary effort might you be making that has been highlighted through this movement that you can then voluntarily release or voluntarily soften. Not trying to get rid of, but just opening, softening, and releasing any unnecessary gripping or effort. And then maintaining that awareness of that softness, that opening, no matter how big or how small. Slowly and smoothly release, feeling the pelvis rolling to neutral. And notice that as you come to neutral, you likely feel the lower back softening and being more supported by the floor. The belly softening. The legs can remain at ease here. They don't have to be working. Now we're going to explore the same movement, but in the opposite direction. Same arc, but opposite direction. So we're going to, again, imagining that pelvis is a bowl that's now resting fairly upright. Let's begin to feel the weight of that underside of the pelvis slowly rolling, but now just through intention. So we're not actually doing the movement. We're going to imagine that. Rolling up the spine so that the lower back begins to gently press into the floor. Again, just through imagination initially. And then when you feel that you have a good idea of how to initiate that movement, let's explore it through a micro movement. Beginning to slowly roll the weight of the pelvis upward, just the tiniest movement. And then pause and notice what you can let go of here. So this is an interesting thing because we are using and wanting to use core muscles to do this movement. But we also want the belly to be soft. So the legs are completely at ease. We're not doing it with the legs. And the belly is soft, or somewhat soft at least. And yet we can feel the weight of the pelvis slowly rolling up. So release any unnecessary effort you might become aware of. And then slowly release back to neutral. And in neutral, notice what more you can let go of here. So even that micro movement can awaken somatic awareness that allows you, if you tune into it, to soften and release and experience more of the support of the floor that's available here. And then let's begin again to explore that same movement. And if you feel comfortable and confident to do so, you can extend the range of the movement slightly. Otherwise, don't. So this time, if it feels comfortable, you can smoothly and slowly roll that weight so that it comes up into the lower back slightly. So the abdomen is slightly hollowing out as the lower back is gently being pressed into the floor or the bed if you're lying in bed. Let the legs be soft and at rest here. They don't need to be making the effort. Let the buttocks be soft. And then slowly release to neutral. And notice that neutral is different than before. So this is the basic pelvic tilt. And what this does is it can soften and release chronic patterns of tension and holding in the core. So we are interested in this work on freeing up the pelvis. And the pelvis can move in a variety of directions. So we've explored one of those very important directions. Now we're going to explore another direction in which the pelvis can move. So we're going to explore the pelvis pivoting so that the hip on one side comes closer to the armpit, and on the other side, the hip moves further away from that side's armpit. So I'll just demonstrate here for anybody who wants to see. So you can see that if you're paying attention, that I am, my right side is shortening. So the right hip, so I'll do it again so you can see. So the right hip is short, it's coming up toward the right armpit. Meanwhile, the left hip is moving further away from the left armpit. So that's going to be the movement we're going to explore. So we're starting from neutral. And again, we're starting from just intention. So notice, how would you internally, I want you to feel into how you will do this movement so that you will be pivoting so that the right hip comes closer to the right armpit as the left hip moves further from the left armpit. And when you feel ready to do so, then explore that with a micro movement. And notice how much effort is required. It's usually way less than we initially make. So as you make this micro movement and you get to the furthest range of that, which is very small, obviously, as a micro movement, pause, and then notice what can you soften and release, what's unnecessary. So how much tension are you holding in your belly that you could soften? How much effort are you making in the legs that you could soften? The answer, by the way, is quite a lot. And then slowly release that micro movement back to neutral. And as before, it's very important to explore finding neutral, not assuming that it's where you started from. Many of us have a lot of unevenness between the two sides because we hold more chronic tension on one side than the other. And so you may find that as we do this, one side will release substantially more than you expected. So really be open to finding neutral through the inner experience. And then when you feel ready to do so, let's explore that movement one more time. And this time, if you feel comfortable doing so, make it a slightly extended range of motion. Now, as you do this and you extend the range, you will notice that the head, if starting from upright, if you're sensitive to it, you'll start to notice the head wants to roll to the right. So you can cooperate with that by gently allowing the head to roll to the right in coordination with the hip moving. If somebody's unmuted, I'm going to mute them. Okay. And then when you're at the maximum range of this small movement that's appropriate in this moment, as usual, pause and see what sensations guide you to explore further softening, further release of unnecessary effort, so that you can really receive the support that's available here and not strain. and then slowly come back to neutral. Now we'll explore the same movement on the other side. So from neutral, when you're ready, begin by exploring just through imagination, bringing the left hip in the direction of the left armpit. So the pelvis is remaining on the floor or on the bed throughout, it's pivoting. And you want to imagine how you would do that movement, bringing the left hip pivoting closer to the left armpit as the right hip moves further from the right armpit. And then when you feel ready to do so, you can begin to explore that in a micro movement. So just the smallest movement that will either confirm that you're able to successfully imagine it, or it will give you some corrective feedback that will allow you to more successfully do it. When you're at the maximum of that micro movement, then pause and see what you can soften. So the legs can be soft. They don't need to be gripping. The belly can be fairly soft here. The back can be at rest. Gently, you might even find gently pressing into the floor. And then slowly release back to neutral. Again, remembering to feel into neutral rather than just going to whatever you think neutral is. And in neutral, take this time to really open up and feel how much support is here. How little effort you actually have to make to just be lying on the floor in this way. And then when you're ready, let's do this one more time, and you can extend the range of the movement slightly if that feels appropriate for you. And as before, when you extend the range in this movement, you'll find that the head is going to want to rotate or roll to the left. So the head is going to roll to the side that's shortening. And you can just allow it to do so and cooperate with that movement. I'm keeping my head to the right so that I can look at the camera and the microphone will pick it up. And then pause. Notice what you can soften. Notice where you can receive the support more. And then slowly come back to neutral. So again, I'm going to remind you that it's important that you are sensitive and responsive to your needs. So I'm going to continue with some other movements. But if you need to take a break or do something different for a moment, or sit up, or anything else, please take care of yourself in that way. For all the rest of us, let's just lie here for one more moment and feel into the sensations and notice what's different now from when we started. Okay, so now we're going to begin to bring this and connect this awareness that we've begun to develop in the pelvis and in the abdomen and in the back. We're going to begin to extend that and connect it up with the mid-back, the upper back, the shoulders, and the neck. So to do this movement, we're going to, give me just one moment to make sure that I don't want to do something else before we do this. Yeah, this is what we're going to do. There are a few other things that I'd like to do, but I'm looking at the time, and I think this will be the most efficient flow for us right now. And if we have time at the end, we can explore a few other things. So we're going to bring our hands behind the head and interlace the fingers there. Now, for some people, find that they have a lot of restriction across the chest that makes it uncomfortable to bring the to allow the arms to rest on the floor in this position. So what I'd like to do, really for all of us, is to initially explore just gently opening that up a little bit by increasing our somatic awareness that will allow us to release the chronic tension that many of us hold in the chest and connecting into the shoulders. So one thing you can do is you can actually just bring, keep your right hand underneath your head, and then bring your left hand and just gently rest it, place the fingertips on the right shoulder where the chest and shoulder connect. And you might notice that you can feel some tension there. You might feel that you can feel the muscle is taut. It might have tenderness for some people. You might notice some that some of the muscle fibers are ropey. There might be knots. So what you can then do is actually, one trick or tip with this work is actually just by using touch, gentle touch in this way, you'll notice for most of us already, if we just open to that, just allow that touch to awaken our awareness of that area of our body, already we might be able to allow for a softening there. Now we're going to combine with that, or actually we won't combine it. We'll bring the hand back to the behind the head. So both arms, both hands behind the head. And what we're going to do, the movement here, is wherever your arms are at, you don't want to strain to bring them to the floor, but wherever your arms are at, so they could be up off the floor, they could be down on the floor, wherever that starting position is, we're going to begin to have the intention to bring the elbows up toward the ceiling, like I'm demonstrating, like wings. We're going to be exploring bringing them up toward the ceiling and then down. So as usual, we're going to start just with imagination. And I want to bring your attention to what's happening now in the lower back and pelvis. So you could notice if you accommodate tightness in the upper back by arching the lower back. Now you've already started to awaken somatic awareness there through the exercises that we've done. So you can allow yourself to soften in the lower back and in the belly, and continue to allow for that softening and that gentle pressing of the lower back into the into the floor. And in fact, you might even, as you're doing this movement, well, I'll instruct you through it in just a moment. So here's how we're going to do it. You're going to have the intention to simultaneously gently roll the weight on your pelvis up so that the pressure is gently pressing into the lower back. It's a small movement. And at the same time, you're going to be lifting the elbows toward the ceiling. This is going to be just an imagination. So I want you to feel now how you would do that, so that you can start to feel how your whole body is connected and can coordinate in this movement. And you'll actually, if you're paying attention, start to feel how the pelvis makes this movement easier, way easier. Now, when you're ready, let's begin to explore it through a micro movement. So simultaneously make the micro movement of rolling the weight of the pelvis upward and beginning to lift the elbows up toward the ceiling. So it's a micro movement, so your elbows may not move perceptibly, or they might only move a fraction of an inch. And when you've done that, pause here. Remember, it should be non-strenuous. If it's strenuous, ease up. So pause and notice what you can soften. Notice that the back can be entirely soft and yielding. If it's not, then just trust that that's possible and explore how that could be possible. And then slowly release. And then let's explore that one more time, this time with a slightly larger movement. So your elbows, if you feel comfortable doing so, may lift up off the floor several inches this time. So rolling the weight on the pelvis upward toward the lower back. So the lower back is gently pressing into the floor, and simultaneously lifting the elbows toward the ceiling. Pause. See what more you can soften. See how much more you can soften the back. See how much more you can soften the belly. Discover how powerful yet gentle and virtually effortless this can be. And then slowly release. And on this movement, because it's more going on, you may notice more of those somatic blind spots that I talked about, where the movement seems to be a little jerky. That's normal. So as you continue with this, that will smooth out. And that is an indicator that the somatic awareness is awakening. So let's do this one more time. And for anybody who's interested in doing so, you can feel free to explore this movement now in a larger range, up to the elbows coming to the ceiling, or up toward the ceiling. So if that feels appropriate, but very, very slowly. And please remember that this is not a race or a competition. So just do what is appropriate for you. So we're rolling the weight of the pelvis up into the lower back. So the lower back is pressing into the floor. And the elbows are beginning to lift up off the floor. Now, as this happens, you might find that tucking the chin in toward the chest slowly helps. When you're at the maximum range is comfortable for you, and there's no rush, so please take your time. As usual, I'd like you to pause and notice what you can let go of that's unnecessary for this. So the legs can be soft. They don't need to be doing much here. The entire back, including the upper back, can be soft. The face can be relaxed. The belly can be soft. And then slowly return back to neutral. As slowly and smoothly as you can. Releasing the pelvis last. And then just noticing here what's different. So you might notice that the back is even more supple, more at rest on the floor. You might notice that the chest feels a little bit more open. You might notice that the upper back and shoulders feel a little more open. I'll remind you again that it's important that you take care of your own needs. So if you need anything, please take care of that. I'm going to continue. So from here, we're going to explore bringing those elbows together in front of our body. So we're going to actually start from the position that we got to in the previous movement, assuming that you got there. And if you would like to, and it's appropriate and you're able to do so, then please feel free to explore getting into the starting position of this movement, just as we did a moment ago, smoothly and slowly. If not, don't worry about it. The starting position for this movement is going to be with the elbows up toward the ceiling, like I'm demonstrating here. Now, actually, before we do that movement, I want to do one more in between. So it's going to be the same starting position with the elbows up. And what we're going to do here is we're going to explore tucking the chin to the chest or to the throat. So it's going to be with the hands behind the head and the elbows up toward the ceiling. We're going to begin to slowly and initially just through intention and imagination, bring the chin in the direction of the chest or throat as smoothly as we can. So when you feel comfortable that you know how to do that, begin to explore that with a tiny movement, just to confirm or give corrective feedback. Then pause and notice what you can release. So can the throat soften here? Yes, by the way, in case you were wondering. Can the back of the neck Soften. Yes. And then release back to neutral. And then we'll explore that one more time. So this time, if it feels comfortable for you, you can do a slightly larger range of this movement. So we're slowly tucking the chin toward the throat or chest. Pausing, tuning into the sensations, noticing if there's strain. If so, please ease up. And then slowly release. Now, if you need to take a short rest, please do so. Otherwise, we're going to continue. And what we're going to do now is we're going to explore from the same starting position and doing the same head tuck. We're going to continue by adding in bringing the elbows together or in the direction of together. So I will demonstrate it to you and then talk you through it. So I'm starting here. I'm tucking my head. And then I'm bringing the elbows together. And then slowly releasing. So that's the movement we're going to do. So beginning with we're beginning with the elbows up toward the ceiling. We're slowly curling the tailbone so the weight of the pelvis shifts and rolls up into the lower back, gently pressing into the floor. Slowly tucking the chin. And then slowly bringing the elbows in the direction of one another. Now, in order to do this, you need to release the upper back. You're only going to get them as close as you're going to get them, so do not strain. When you're at the maximum range that's appropriate for you in this moment, pause and let go of any unnecessary effort. And then slowly release. And this time you can release all the way to rest. And you can bring your arms down to your sides and extend your legs so that you're fully supported by the floor. Now I'm going to sit up, and you do not need to. You're welcome to sit up if you'd like, but you're also welcome to just rest there. And I'm sitting up because I want to just make some space if anybody has questions. So if you have a question, then this would be a great time to ask it. And you can do so. Again, I just want to remind you, if you speak, you will be recorded in the video, and you will be giving me your implicit consent to include that in the video that I'll be publishing on YouTube and on my website. If you prefer not to, then you can type the question in the chat. So I'll give a few moments here if anybody has any questions. Was it a pelvic tilt to arch the back? So any arching of the back is going to involve a tilt of the pelvis as opposed to flatten. So the pelvis can tilt, as I'm using the term tilting. We're tilting it in two directions. So like I said, it's like there's a bowl resting on the floor, and we're gonna either we're gonna be able to roll it along this imaginary line, forward and backward. Okay, so the what was I going to say here? So we talk about in anatomical terms, we would say that when we are arching the back, that's going to be an anterior tilt. You don't need to care or know about this. I'm just explaining it. That's an anterior tilt. Now, most people actually have a chronic anterior tilt. If they don't, then they probably do and don't know about it because they've also got combined with that a lot of other stuff going on. But that anterior tilt is how most people sit. Most people sit in chairs with a sway back. So if I was to illustrate for you here, so if I'm sitting and I have let me change the position of my camera so that you can see this. So if I'm sitting and I arch the back, this is an anterior tilt of the pelvis. It's a sway back position. This is how most people sit. Most people will find that when they are actually sitting in alignment so that their weight of their body is supported by the structure of their skeleton, which is optimal. It's the most efficient way to sit or to be in your body, is to allow the skeleton, the structure of the skeleton, to support the weight of your body. So most people will find that when they are sitting, allowing their weight to be supported by the structure of their skeleton, they'll actually have a sense initially that they're slightly hunched over. That will be the proprioceptive sense, the internal sense of how one is in space. It will seem as though you're hunched over. So through these explorations, what we're doing is awakening that somatic awareness that allows us to just allow the pelvis to be released into a neutral position. What that's going to do is allow, because the pelvis, the backside of the pelvis, so the pelvis is constructed of two hemipelvises, a right and a left. In between, they're connected by the sacrum, which is a fusion of the lowest vertebrae in the spine. So when the pelvis is anteriorly tilted, the spine is being placed in, there's a strain being placed on the spine. Now the spine goes all the way, as we probably know, goes all the way up the back into the neck. That's all the spine. So what happens when we are chronically like that is that we are putting this strain all the way up the spine into the shoulders, the neck, the head. So this is going to translate into pain, discomfort, and restriction all the way up into the head, neck, and so forth. So the pelvis can tilt anteriorly or posteriorly. And we're just exploring both of those. So it's an anterior tilt. And again, you don't really need to care. I'm just answering the question as best I can. It's an anterior tilt when the lower back is arched. And if that did not answer your question, feel free to ask it again. I also saw that there was another question here. I would have to go to a different screen to see it, so let me do that. It says, I noticed a lot of tension that I was holding and could release. My question is, first of all, awesome. So that's huge. Just becoming aware of that and noticing that you can voluntarily release that means that you are awakening somatic awareness. So you can already see that something so simple and gentle can translate into a real practical outcome and benefit right away. So I promise you that that continues as you continue with the work. So the question is, if this is meant to be a practice, and as in doing this regularly. So great question. So yes and no. So my intention with this is not that you need to do those exercises every day of your life. But especially initially, doing these regularly is highly valuable. And so in the full training that I offer, I suggest that people practice daily for about 20 minutes. And the reason is because we can instantaneously make changes to the nervous system. The only thing is that practically and realistically speaking, we have a whole, not just one habit, but many habits, many patterns and conditionings in the nervous system that all come together like this constellation to keep everything as it is. So just in a very simple way that probably would make sense is just what I described earlier, that if we're chronically locked into an anterior tilt, then that's going to translate into all of these other holding patterns and conditioning all the way up the spine into the legs. You're going to have tight hamstrings. You're going to have stuff in the gluteal muscles. You're going to have stuff all the way up the spine. You're going to have stuff in the abdomen. You're going to have stuff in the chest. You're going to have stuff in the shoulders. It's all coming together to hold this. Why? Again, because, as I said, the optimal, most efficient way for us to be in our bodies is to allow for the structure of our skeleton to do as much of the heavy lifting as possible. And so anytime that anything is deviating from that, then the whole body has to accommodate that. So then all of this conditioning develops, which is going to all function together to hold in and lock in this overall body pattern, which is why in this work, we don't really do anything in isolation. We attempt to integrate it, which is why we're focused on head, neck, jaw, shoulders, but we started from the pelvis because it's so important and we want to integrate that into the whole body patterning. In order to do that, because there's so much conditioning there, the tendency is you can awaken that, you can discover that you can voluntarily release it, but it doesn't become the new habit or new pattern usually right away because there's so much else that's already propping up the old way. So repeated exploration through these movements over time is very, very helpful to recondition the nervous system so that we can release the old habits and we can develop new conditioning that supports efficiency and pain-free, easy movement in our bodies and in our lives. So hopefully that answered your question. If not, please feel free to ask again. So anybody else before we get back into the movement? Okay, I'm going to just take a drink of tea. And then we can begin again. So let me just remember what I want to do next. Yes, okay. So hopefully you've started to experience some change in the lower back, that you've started to notice that change integrating into the upper back and shoulders. Now we're going to begin to explore bringing that into the neck. So we'll go on the back again. So let me tilt my camera. So we're going to start from the same position, lying on our backs, knees bent, feet on the floor, arms at our sides to start. And it's always important to take a moment to find the comfort here. Because we, as I've said, we want to start from comfort, move from comfort. So just take a moment to open to the sensations, and if you need to make any adjustments to support yourself, do so. So you might find that you need to adjust the placement of your feet. You might notice if you have the habit of, well, this will change in a moment, but if you have the habit of arching the neck, that you can soften the neck. So we've already kind of started to open that up. So just notice that you can soften that and let your head and neck really be supported by the floor. So the neck doesn't have to be in full contact with the floor, but it can be soft and yielding and moving more in the direction of the floor. Now from here, we're going to bring the hands again behind the head and the elbows up toward the ceiling, which I'm not demonstrating because I'm turning to the camera so that I'm not blocking the sound from the microphone. And we're going to, in this movement, we're going to explore bringing our elbows in the direction of our knees. We're going to do so as we keep the upper back on the floor. So consider for a moment in your imagination what this means. So if you imagine for a moment that you're starting from this position and you're going to bring your elbows in the direction of the knees, not touching the knees. We're not going to go nearly that far, but just in the direction of the knees. You can just imagine that if you're to do that and you're going to keep the upper back on the floor, how might you do that? And I'll give you a clue. To initiate this movement efficiently, you're going to want to start by rolling the weight of the pelvis so that the lower back is pressing into the floor gently. Again, keeping the legs soft, because this movement is initiated from these deep core muscles. So the psoas muscle, which is, the psoas muscle is this very, very powerful muscle. There's a psoas major and a psoas minor. There's also the iliac, something. And they work together. These deep core muscles work together in a very powerful way. For most of us, those have been locked up. We haven't had use of them, so we've been straining. But as we're freeing up the pelvis, we're gaining access to these powerful muscles. So the psoas is connected to the lumbar spine. So it's connected to the back, the lower back. And then the psoas minor connects to the pelvis, and the psoas major actually goes through the pelvis and connects onto the femur, the leg, the thigh. So these muscles, if you imagine the placement of them running from the back through the pelvis, you can understand why the belly can be soft as the core is still doing the movement. So in order to do this movement efficiently, we're going to be gently rolling the pelvis upward so that the lower back is gently pressing into the floor. We're going to want to slowly tuck that chin. Again, just imagine it. And then you're going to want to utilize deep core muscles as much as possible in order to begin to lift the head. Now, the head in this movement is going to be weight. It's like, you could imagine it like a bowling ball that you're cradling in your hands. The bowling ball is not capable of making effort. So I want you to feel it like your head couldn't do anything. Your throat is not going to be doing this. This is going to, your hands and arms are going to lift the head. And the back of the neck is going to lengthen and soften. So when you feel that you know how to initiate this movement, begin to explore this through micro movements. So micro movement, curling the tailbone, gently pressing the lower back, tucking the chin, and lifting the elbows in the direction of the knees. Now your hands should not lift up off the floor. It's a micro movement. When you're at the maximum of this micro movement, as usual, pause. This should be non-strenuous. If it's strenuous, ease up. Or take a rest if you need. Always be gentle. But if you're able to do this without strain, then just notice here as you pause what you can further soften and release. Notice that the whole back can release even more to support this movement. And then slowly release to neutral. And when you're ready, let's explore this same movement in a slightly extended range. So this time, it's okay for you to, if it feels appropriate, it's okay for you to lift the head an inch or two. If not, then just explore the micro movement again. So again, I'll talk you through it. We initiate it by rolling the weight of the pelvis so that the lower back is pressing gently into the floor. Legs are relaxed. Belly is soft. Gently tuck the chin slowly toward the chest. And then slowly bring the elbows in the direction of the knees. Keeping the head heavy, letting the neck be soft, letting the back of the neck lengthen. So the neck, throat, and head are not doing a thing. The upper back remains on the floor. Pause, release any unnecessary effort you become aware of. Let it be soft. See how effortless you can allow this to be. Obviously, some effort is required. Let it be the minimum necessary and no more. Let the back be totally yielding to the floor. The back doesn't need to do anything here. And then maintaining that awareness of that softness, slowly and smoothly come back to neutral. And when you're in neutral, no rush, take your time. When you are in neutral, we're going to explore a variation on this, which may allow the back to release even more and the neck to release even more. So we're going to start. You can keep your right hand behind the head. Left hand you can release. And gently curl the tailbone, press the lower back gently into the floor. This is going to allow you to access the psoas. It's this powerful muscle that I was talking about. And so then from here, notice how easily you can now lift that left foot up off the floor and slowly bring that up to balance over the chest. And as you do this, you'll feel the lower back getting a nice massage. You can then take your left hand and bring that to the front of the left knee. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to explore bringing the right elbow to the left knee and the left knee to the right elbow. So we're going to be making use of all of the things that we've just started to integrate into our somatic awareness. So this should not be too challenging at this point. If it is challenging for you, that's okay. I don't mean to suggest otherwise. But my point is that whatever we've just discovered through the previous few movements should translate here. So bring that right elbow up toward the ceiling. And then from here, I'd like you to imagine how you will smoothly and slowly, with control and ease, bring the left knee to the right elbow and the right elbow to the left knee. And importantly, in a non-strenuous way. So again, I want to point out that the things that we just explored absolutely apply here. So we're going to allow for the upper back to remain on the floor. This is not like an abdominal crunch. We're not looking to use or overuse the superficial abdominal muscles. We're wanting to rely upon the anatomically correct movement that is non-strenuous and easy. So when you feel like you have some clues as to how to do that, let's explore it together. So let's begin to initiate a micro movement of bringing the right elbow to the left knee and the left knee to the right elbow. Pause. Notice what you can soften. Let the belly be soft. Let the lower back be yielding and supported by the floor. Be sure that you're breathing gently, breathing. And then slowly release that micro movement. Now, if it feels appropriate to you, then we can explore this in a slightly extended range. And I'll talk you through my exploration of it. So I'm going to begin by further rolling the weight up the back. So the lower back is pressing into the floor. The weight of my left hand is gently bringing the knee further up toward my head. And I'm rolling my head to the left as my right elbow comes along in that direction. Then I'm going to begin to lift the right elbow, letting my head be heavy and my back of my neck be long and soft. Now the right elbow the right shoulder is starting to slightly lift up as the upper back remains. And I'm going to turn back to the camera, the microphone, so that you can hear me. But I found that through that, my right elbow touched my left knee. Now, whatever happens for you, do that. So don't attempt to force it. I was doing this with my eyes closed, and I just found that they eventually touched. So I was not straining to get them to touch. At whatever point is the maximum that's appropriate for you in this moment, even if that means you have not lifted your head at all. That's totally fine. Pause and see how much softer and yielding you can allow this to be. Remember, it should be non-strenuous. This is not an abdominal crunch. To do this efficiently, you have to soften and release the back. And then slowly release back to neutral. Remember that taking your time is very, very important, so don't rush. And then if and when you're ready, let's switch to the other side. So this time we will have the left hand behind the head, right arm initially just resting on the floor. And then gently roll the weight on the pelvis so that the pelvis the lower back starts to press into the floor. And from here, you'll notice that you can then begin to lift that right foot off the floor. It's got a little bit of a spring to it if you allow the psoas to do the work here. And that knee can come up and balance. Then you can take your right hand and place that in front of the right knee. And from here, we're going to begin to explore, just with intention at first, how we would bring the left elbow to the right knee and the right knee to the left elbow. Now, by now, since you did it on the other side, you probably already have some clues. And when you feel ready, we can begin to explore a micro movement here. Bringing the left knee and the right elbow in the direction of one another. Making sure that you can breathe, that you're not straining. Letting the back be soft. And then slowly coming back to neutral. And then we'll do this one more time, and this time, let's explore as much of a range as feels appropriate. So long as you move slowly and smoothly, and you're not using force or momentum, you can explore this as much as you want. So again, I'll walk you through my exploration. So I feel the further bringing that weight and gentle pressure further up the lower back, feeling that pressing into the floor as my back yields even more. And feel then the weight of my right hand gently is encouraging that knee in the direction of my left elbow. I can then, already got my head rolled in the direction of the camera, but I could imagine that I'd be rolling my head in that direction to the right, the elbows coming along, and then I can, keeping my head yielding, my back of my neck lengthening and soft, lift, my shoulder is beginning to come up off the floor, but my upper back remains. Now for me, I notice that this side isn't quite as soft as the other side. So my elbow and knee aren't coming together in this moment. That's okay. And then pause, let go of any unnecessary effort. Let it be soft. And then slowly coming back to neutral. So you can have your feet on the floor, arms at rest on the floor. I'll remind you again, please take care of your needs, whatever those might be. And if it feels appropriate to you, then you can just rest here for a moment and just tune into the sensations and notice what's different now from when you started. And you'll also notice that, maybe notice that those old habits of tensing up may reassert themselves, but if you're willing to just allow those sensations to guide you, you now have increased somatic awareness that allows you to voluntarily release any unnecessary effort so that you can just be soft and yielding. Let the floor and gravity do all the work. And then just check the time. Okay, so we are at 2 hours, and I had intended to keep it to 2 hours, but there are a few more things that I would like to cover. And so I apologize for it running a little bit long. Please do not feel obligated to stick around if you do not wish to, but I will continue to explore a few more things with you if you would like. So the next thing that I'd like to explore with you is that hopefully by now you have noticed this softening in the abdomen, the pelvis, the lower back. That started to integrate into the upper back and the neck and shoulders. You may notice, however, as many people with chronic head, neck, and jaw tension do, that there's tension that runs along the side of the neck and comes up into just behind the ears. This is such a common thing, in fact, that that these points are very tender for most people. And there are some martial arts that take advantage of this by utilizing these tender points to the advantage of the person who's doing the assault. However, I no longer have much of any tenderness behind the ears. So that tenderness is not it is extraordinarily common, but it is not a biological or physiological necessity. It's just due to our unfortunate ignorance. So now we are no longer going to have to be ignorant. We can now be aware. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use a very gentle head roll to awaken and enliven the somatic awareness in this area of the body, which will allow us to then voluntarily release some of this chronic tension. So we'll begin with the head upright. And notice that you can let the back of the head and neck be soft and yielded. You can also gently allow the head to tuck, the chin to tuck, so that the back of the head, the neck lengthens slightly. You don't need to strain, just let it be gentle to gently lengthen the back of the neck. Now from here, we're going to slowly, well, initially just have the intention and explore with your imagination, but the movement will be to slowly roll the head to the left, then we'll come back to center, and then slowly to the right, and back to center. So initially, just imagine how you will do this. And be aware of the sensations in your body that might be calling for your attention that allow you to soften more. So just remember, the legs can be soft. The back can be soft. Pelvis can be soft. The belly can be soft. Shoulders can be soft. So in your imagination, I want you to imagine rolling the head slightly to the left. When you feel ready to do so, begin to explore this with a micro movement. So the head remains in contact with the floor, rolling to the left. So explore that in a micro movement, virtually imperceptible to anybody who's watching you. But you can feel the engagement of the muscles on the, initially on the left side of the neck. And then slowly release. Now explore the micro movement to the right. Really feel the weight of the head. The head doesn't need to be making effort here. The head can just be like a bowling ball on the floor. So let it be heavy. And then slowly release. Now, if it feels appropriate, you can slightly extend this range. So we're going to go to the left. This time, feel free to move a few inches if it feels appropriate. Move slowly and smoothly. Now, particularly with this movement, people may notice kind of speed bump that happens if you're moving too quickly. That speed bump is because there's this tension that you're not yet aware of how to voluntarily release. So ease up. That means you've just hit that edge and you need to explore that edge. So slow, gentle, smooth. Then pause. Let go of any unnecessary effort here. And then slowly and smoothly come back to neutral. And when you're in neutral, take a moment to soften. Again, let the back of the neck be lengthening and softening. Let the head be heavy. The head doesn't need to do anything here. And then slowly begin to roll the head to the right. Pause. Just notice the sensations and allow yourself to soften and open. So the face can be soft. The ears can be soft. The throat can be soft. The shoulders can be soft. Back can be soft. And then slowly come back to neutral. Now we'll explore, again, no rush here. Take your time to get back to neutral. And I want to let you know that the next exploration will be the same movement, but we're going to add gentle touch with our fingertips that will allow us to, in many cases, more rapidly awaken that somatic awareness that can allow us to release those chronic tensions that so many of us have here along the sides of the neck and behind the ears. So when you're in neutral, you can take your left fingers, your however many fingers you want, a few fingers, gently press the fingertips, or not press, but place the fingertips behind the ears or along the neck, wherever you notice that any tension or tenderness. And we're not prodding, we're just lightly applying that light touch so that it gives us a greater feedback that lets us more rapidly awaken that somatic awareness and let go. So when you're ready, we're going to, keeping the fingers lightly there, slowly roll the head to the left. And if the jaw wants to open and be soft, let it. Let it just do its thing. Pause and soften. See how yielding you can be. And then slowly come back to neutral, keeping the fingers lightly there, encouraging that awareness so that you can further soften and release. When you're in neutral, you can release that left hand. Just take a moment to notice the difference between the left side and the right side. Let the head be heavy, let the back of the neck be soft and lengthening. And then bring your right fingertips to the right side of the neck or skull behind the ears, wherever you notice tenderness or tension or sensation that is calling for your attention in that area. And just have a light touch. And then slowly begin to roll the head to the right, keeping that light touch. And let the jaw be soft. Let it do whatever it wants to do. If you find yourself drooling, well, okay. Then pause. Notice how much you can soften here. And then slowly come back to upright. Then you can release the hand down to the side. And notice what has changed. I'm always amazed at how much changes. My head feels so heavy right now, it's like I could go to sleep. Very nice. Okay, so I'd like to do one more movement exploration with you. And we're going to do this. It's going to expand upon what we've just done. So we're going to, and I'm going to talk you through it first so you can imagine it, and then we'll do it together. So you're going to slowly roll your head to the left. And then as you do, you're going to allow for your jaw to be relaxed and to also move to the left. And it's going to open at the same time. Then once the head is rolled to the left and the jaw is open to the left, we're going to slowly close the mouth back to neutral. And then reopen it and let it go to the left again. So when you feel that you can imagine that, or at least imagine initiating that movement, which shouldn't be too hard by now since we've been doing that, let's begin to slowly roll the head to the left, letting the jaw open and also go to the left. And you can feel free to let the head go as far to the left as is comfortable for you. Now, when you are there, no rush. But when you're there, take a moment to soften and notice that you can really soften in the throat and in the jaw, particularly on the left side of the jaw. So really let the jaw and throat be soft. And then very slowly and as smoothly as you can, begin to explore closing the mouth to neutral. So the head remains turned, the mouth slowly closes, and then slowly opens again so that it is opening and also moving to the left. Now, if you have a lot of jaw stuff, you'll probably notice a lot of jerkiness in the movement. That's okay. It gets smoother as you continue to explore it. And by the way, that will also come along with increased range of movement, freedom of movement, ease, and pleasure. And once you've opened the mouth again, slowly roll back to neutral. And Again, there's no rush, so please take your time. I can't see many people, so I'm not sure what stage in the movement people are at, so I'm just going to continue with the instruction, but please take your time. So when you're back in neutral, we're going to do the same thing to the right side. So slowly let the head roll to the right. And as you do so, let the jaw open and move to the right. Then, when you're at the maximum range that's comfortable for you, you can take a moment to just soften. Let the throat be soft, let the jaw be soft. And then slowly close the mouth. And then slowly open the mouth again. And then slowly roll back to neutral. Letting the back of the neck be long and soft. So that is the end of what I'm going to guide us through today. Please don't feel rushed. Take your time here. Continue to explore as slowly as you need to. And then you can take a moment when you're done with that movement to extend your legs, let your arms be at rest, and just notice what's different. And notice that if those old habits of armoring, tension, apprehension, impatience, those reassert themselves, just notice that you now have this ability to voluntarily release and soften. And again, no hurry, but when you are ready, feel free to slowly come to sitting. So don't rush, don't hurry. In this work, we've done a tremendous amount. So you don't want to surprise yourself by moving too quickly, because you might surprise yourself and tweak your neck. So you want to go slowly. And my intention here is that I'm going to momentarily, I'm going to stop the recording for this workshop, but I'll stay on with everybody who is interested in asking questions. And I will also, I think almost everybody here is presently, with a few exceptions, is presently participating in the full program of the Somatic Reawakening and Integration. So you already know about that program, but for anybody else, I'll also be sharing with you about that program in case you're interested in exploring this work any further. So for everybody who's here live, thank you so much for your participation. It means a great deal. And for everybody who's watching the replay on YouTube or on my website, thank you also for your participation. And I will be creating another video that I'll include on my website at joeylott.com/somatics that will allow you to learn more about the full program, should you be interested in that. I also want to mention that if somebody is viewing this on YouTube, you may want to go to joeylott.com/somatics anyway, because you can also learn more whether or not you wanted to participate in that program, more opportunities to learn about this work and to incorporate it into your life so that you can gain the benefits from it. I believe that's all that I needed to say before I stop recording. So thank you, and this will be the end of the recording.